Good morning and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. Another day in paradise, a beautiful day that is. The traffic seems to have eased up quite a bit since last week Friday when SAT results were announced, and of course the CXC and CAPE examinations are now at an end. School officially closes on Friday, but I guess the benefits of that is starting to be reaped, although there are concerns over the fact that going into the holidays, it's going to be a more difficult time for the police service. There are remedial classes for students who scored 50% on the essay exams, adding to which, in terms of the summer vacation, what we deem the summer vacation anyway, there are no lifeguards on duty at the major beaches across Trinidad and Tobago, which is, of course, a danger to anyone who is entering the water. But that just to tell you, there's a lot to talk about here when it comes to Trinidad and Tobago. Though we are a small nation and a twin island paradise, we have chosen some topics this morning that certainly could be deemed as controversial, but nevertheless, we must have those discussions. So alongside me to have such discussions is my co-host and colleague, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton. And a quick update as, you know, the world news travels fast and Prime Minister Boris Johnson is now ex-Prime Minister, I believe.
No, he's not ex-Prime Minister.
He's not ex-Prime Minister.
He has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party, and he will remain in the position of Prime Minister until a new leader of the party is found.
Well, so for all intents and purposes,
no, he hasn't resigned the post as Prime Minister.
He has fallen from grace. He is more or less starting the process that his political career is probably over, for all things considered. And it is something that we do have to wonder what it is. What will it take for a similar situation to occur here? And I'm not saying that we don't have the controversies that caused Boris Johnson to resign from his post as party leader. We do have similar controversies, not all the same. We don't have, admittedly, I don't think we have anything even remotely close to what happened with regards to Mr. Pincher. But we do have other similar things: political interference, scandals with regards to public health regulations over COVID-19, as well as the cost of living crisis, which, just as it's technically not necessarily the fault of our local politicians, it also was not necessarily the fault of Mr. Boris Johnson. But when you sit at the top, you will take the blame, whether rightfully or wrongfully, just as how politicians are quick to take the accolades of things going well, whether it was anything to do of their policies or just happened to be the environment being well off at the time.
How is not Boris Johnson's fault?
Well, in the sense of he didn't cause the war in Ukraine, he didn't cause the cost of shipping crisis that started. So those factors he doesn't have direct control over, just like how Dr. Keith Rowley and Colin Imbert, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, don't have control over the international pressures. However, at the end of the day, when you sit at the top, you know, when things are going well, even if it has nothing to do with the Prime Minister or the President of a nation, they take the credit. So they will take some of the blame.
Boris Johnson's demise doesn't actually come from the shipping crisis or the economic situation. It actually doesn't even come from Brexit or the war in Ukraine. There are two major points within the party that has caused great discredit to the prime ministership of Boris Johnson. The first one was the mere fact that he broke his own COVID-19 lockdown measures. There was an actual independent report into it. How independent that was, that has come into question. Nevertheless, at the end of it all, it found that he was responsible for breaking COVID-19 regulations, and according to evidence, he actually lied to the British public. So that was one aspect of it. But his party members still backed and supported him, which was rather interesting. There were a few that actually chastised him. But in the other instance, when we saw, I think it was close to 43 resignations in 48 hours on the part of Boris Johnson's party, the Conservative Party, the major issue was his dishonesty. People have stated, when I say people, I mean former ministers, they're now ex-ministers, still members of the party and still members of parliament. Former ministers have stated that they can no longer disagree with him behind closed doors and try to agree with him in public and put on this stronghold and accept his leadership, because it's become so crass, the level of corruption, and when I say corruption, corruption doesn't have to mean passing money. I mean just dishonesty, that they can no longer tolerate it. The major issue was how he dealt with and how he handled a sexual scandal involving
Right.
one of his ex-chief whips.
Right, but the thing is, he's not at the center of the scandal, right? And it's not as though, look at it this way, he would have had a lot more capital if the economy was doing well, if people's standard of living was going fine, and if he did not have major issues to deal with. So because he can't handle these, at the end of the day, the situation going on with that happened with the sexual assault allegations, that's not necessarily affecting people's standard of living. But if you can't treat with that properly, how am I going to trust that you're going to deal with our rising cost of living? How am I going to trust that your corruption and excess is not going to then spill over? And you could argue we have that same question here. That's one of the reasons why, at the end of the day, some of the controversies of our government, it's not necessarily affecting us directly, except in the fact that it could be a sign of corruption. And then, of course, where you have some corruption, there's probably more corruption that's spread out, that's affecting our day-to-day lives. When it affects your day-to-day life, then that's when the voting public will start to complain about it a lot more.
Well, I hear you, but you actually yourself made an argument earlier, which is a counter-argument to what you're stating. And that is, though he's not the center of the controversies or the allegations, I mean, he's at the center of the COVID-19 lockdown rules being broken.
Yes.
But in relation to his former chief whip, deputy chief whip in Parliament and the sexual allegations, you said it yourself. Though he's not at the center, as leader, he will still take a lot of blame for his handling of the situation. The economic crisis within the United Kingdom, it's bad. Not in terms of the economy is stagnant, not in terms of the situations you can use to compare to down here in our economy, but it's simply because, as you mentioned, the cost of living is going up. But that is not the reason why. Because I agree with you, if the economy was better in the United Kingdom, things might have been swung more in his favor to a certain degree. But the British public has actually lost faith and confidence in Boris Johnson. He was put there to push through Brexit, which he has done to a certain extent. He has not been completely successful thus far, but he has gotten it through to a certain degree. The British public have lost faith and confidence in him simply because of the level of dishonesty and mistrust that they've seen in him. So your arguments are not unfair, but it's not the entirety of the situation.
I think just as how people are looking towards the government and blaming them here for our cost of living going up, those sentiments would also be there. And again, it might even be to some degree unfair, those sentiments. However, that is reality in politics. And I guess ultimately speaking, Boris Johnson is looking at the situation and saying, I have lost support, not just potentially from the general public, because at the very least, that in the short term, you could get away with that a little bit, unless the election is right around the corner. But if you lose support of your party, of the members of your party in Parliament, then you can't really do anything as part of the legislature. And if parts of your cabinet are resigning, then you can't necessarily do anything as part of the executive either. So how are you going to deal now? Because the cost of living situation, at the end of the day, it might not start from anything you did, but you do have to manage it. How is he going to deal with it moving forward? Can he even deal with it in the position that he finds himself in? I don't think so. I guess this is him realizing, look, politically speaking, I am at a dead end.
And this is the thing. Boris Johnson was only holding on to his position, though there was so much controversy surrounding him, simply because publicly he had the backing of his MPs and ministers, though wanted to resign within recent months. And there was even that issue with, I think it's Dominic Cummings, who was his former advisor as well, who Boris Johnson refused to dismiss. Dominic Cummings then resigned on his own accord. So all that over the last year, there was a lot. But the public support of him from his MPs, his ministers, was still there. From the moment that Rishi Sunak I'm not even talking about Mr. Javid at this point in time. I'm talking about Rishi Sunak in particular. From the time the Chancellor of the United Kingdom tendered his resignation, and the letter that he sent to Boris Johnson became public, that is when everything went downhill. So you're right. He doesn't have the power in terms of the executive or legislature. The issue is, up till last night, Boris Johnson was still holding on to power. Up till last night, he had fired one of his ministers. I'm not entirely sure why. Even now, as much as I've read the articles, I still can't understand why. He fired one of his ministers following over 40 resignations within the party. And he still said, I am going to be Prime Minister. I'm going to hold on to this position. You know, I've been given a mandate. And when he woke up this morning, something clicked. Oh, wait, hold on. I don't have the support. I can't continue. Because last night in the United Kingdom as well, another major blow was the Attorney General of the United Kingdom advising publicly Mr. Johnson to resign.
I think at the end of the day, his mandate for Brexit, and people might say Brexit worked or Brexit didn't work, we need to understand the environment that caused Brexit technically no longer exists. Europe is a whole different world right now. Everything from their defense policy, defense spending, of course the economic factors and considerations are all very different. And while the UK might not necessarily rejoin the EU anytime soon, at least not without a significant amount of negotiating and details to be worked out, that whole situation is different. So his mandate for Brexit, technically, whether you think it's accomplished or not accomplished, it no longer really exists because Europe is a whole different world from February the 24th. Once that first Russian tank rolled in, everything changed for Europe. And I do also wonder if that is also one of the pressures of having to deal with that situation. Because when you're under an economic strain and your finance minister, that's what the chancellor is when he resigns. That's not a good look. Because then now, who do you get to replace him? Of substance that's willing to replace him.
Now, bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson also survived a no-confidence vote a couple of weeks ago. A no-confidence vote within the party a couple of weeks ago, he survived that. But this was in early June. He actually won it by 211 votes to 148. But it's incredible when you look at Boris Johnson. He was an insanely popular character as a reporter, and then when he became Mayor of London, he was incredibly popular. He was known for his gimmickry. He was actually, when I say gimmickry, I mean in the positive manners. Boris Johnson had this way of making a fool of himself. Even his hairstyle was said to be deliberate. You know, Boris Johnson's hairstyle, it's just all over the place. Even that was said to be deliberate. He used to make fun of himself. And he had this way of answering questions in which he was very descriptive, in which you would think that he is a primary school child trying to actually describe another individual. He would call individuals spineless, jelly-like substances. So Boris Johnson was very popular. When he became Foreign Secretary, he still had a level of popularity that saw him take over the leadership party of the Conservative, the leadership of the Conservative Party. And he had a landslide victory 3 years ago in the elections. So this is an incredible downfall of a political leader, but by his own making.
One of the interesting things, and you do have to ask yourself, to what extent do politicians, crisis might be an opportunity, but then for most politicians, perhaps crisis, regardless of how it unfolds, it's just bad timing for your career because you're stuck holding the baton when bad things are happening to the population, and they're going to look to you, and whether rightfully or wrongfully, they're going to blame you. And to some extent, you're seeing that. I don't think most, with the exception of maybe Mia Mottley, most politicians that we have seen, most world leaders, I'm not sure how well they're coming out of this post-COVID, now mid-Ukraine-Russia war scenario. Because the French election probably seemed a little bit closer than it was supposed to be. In Grenada, that snap election seemed to be quite well mistimed on behalf of the now former Prime Minister. And, well, now the UK the UK Prime Minister, his political career more or less seems to be on its last legs.
And very finally, as we take a break here, ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson, in all fairness to him, sensational, humorous, but most importantly, charismatic. Charisma is a hell of a thing on a political platform. Are we seeing that within our leaders down here? I'm transitioning on from the United Kingdom to TNT. Are we seeing that level of charisma in our future political leaders, or even the current ones, down here in Trinidad and Tobago? Charisma is a hell of a thing. We're going to take a break now here on the program, and when we return, well, we'll continue our discussions. We'll take it back to a local topic. Stay tuned.
Ocho. 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 Ocho.
Organic Ocho candy. What's inside counts.
As I run through the day, there's one thing that I need to give me more smiles and motivation to lead, to make new memories and nutrition to grow. My Kiss Enriched brand, the best taste that I know. Fill your day with love, we deliver the best for you. All across the nation, to make your moments feel new. Fill your day with love, we bake the best bread for you. A taste of inspiration, to make those dreams come true.
Baked fresh for you every day and delivered nationwide. Kiss Enriched bread.
Fill your day with love.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN. So as we take things now to what's happening here in Trinidad and Tobago, this morning Sean and I are now adding to the list, what we've called the list, things that Fitzgerald Hines says. Yes, that's the list. And in Senate yesterday, Fitzgerald Hines made the comment. Now, this is a national security minister, and he's not wrong in making his comments, by the way, but understand from where I'm coming from. He said the country has dangerous gangs, whether they are Rasticity, ABG, Sixes, Muslims, and all other so-called gangs, and they are creating havoc. We are very much well aware of this. We completely understand that, and you are stating the obvious. The question is, what is being done about it? So, whilst there are laws in place to deal with gangs, gang members, and those affiliated or associated with gangs in any form or manner, has there been any actual real effect from it? Adding to that, the government is now set to lose one of their biggest income earners when the mask mandate comes to an end, because it is reported that they've actually earned, well, not earned, we don't know if they've collected all of it as yet, but they've issued over 32 million TT dollars in fines as it relates to the mask mandates and the breaking of COVID-19 regulations. So as that comes to an end, they're going to lose money. So now, with COVID out of the way, to a certain extent, from a national security perspective, exactly what is being done? Low detection rates. You said that you actually disagree that intelligence was low. You said I was in the command center during the protest, during what took place on Monday. Oh, what were you commanding? What were you doing? What was taking place? You know, so to come and now state this again, it's amazing that you're actually paid such a wonderful salary to do nothing but state the obvious.
I would like to point out, he also said that the Child Protection Unit is currently investigating over 2,500 matters. That's nice. If the detection rate is less than 20%, I think, in some cases or in most cases, that could be the average in all respects, then does it really matter how many cases were investigated? Because that just means that the majority of those cases aren't necessarily going to be seen through, or there are a lot of cases that we're just missing altogether. So one thing that we never get is closure rates, conviction rates. Over half of the men and women in prison, most of it will be young men, they're in there for pre-trial detention. They haven't been convicted. They have to be minded by the state on pre-trial detention. I mean, it goes, and on our later topic, it then exacerbates the situation if we're going to continue to deny bail or double up on bail or change double jeopardy, as we spoke about yesterday, so that they could be charged again. The implications are potentially horrendous because the system is not necessarily working. So then on top of that, when we get these, for lack of a better word, primary school level answers. Think about it. When you're in primary school and you're writing an essay, you know, your sentences are very basic. My name is this, I do this, I am this, my father is this, whatever, whatever. There are gangs are bad, gangs hurt people, they are dangerous gangs. That's what he's saying. Who over the age of, 12 doesn't understand that a criminal gang is dangerous and a criminal gang is causing havoc on the streets? Who doesn't understand that? And I get it. He spent 14 minutes at the end of the press conference talking about all the social programs that are in place to try to alleviate the problem. But yet, think about it. The problem is not being alleviated.
So, his statements in relation to the gangs that are causing havoc here in Trinidad and Tobago, that is a serious comment to make in the Senate from the perspective that it comes across as though it's not your responsibility to deal with the situation at all. And that is rather worrying. I mean, the comment that you made in relation to it's not my job to make people feel safe. To a certain extent, yes, it's your job to create policy and implement it, ensure that it's carried out. And so that's all part of making people feel safe. But one bill in Trinidad and Tobago or 100 bills in Trinidad and Tobago is not going to change anything, because we've seen that with anti-gang legislation. And how effective has that been? Adding to that, we have low detection rates. Let's be honest, Minister, we have low detection rates. I'm not saying that your job is easy, but without preventative measures for crimes, then we're wasting our time. We're just waiting for something to happen with the expectation that it will happen, with the hope that it will not happen, but we'll deal with it after the fact.
With regards to the double jeopardy bill amendments or whatever, the AG said that consultation was had with various stakeholders, including law enforcement, judiciary, etc. But I do have to ask, some of these things, the initiatives that we do see, to me they look like patches. The system is broken, and instead of actually fixing the problem, what we're going to do is we're going to try and treat with some of the symptoms. Oh wait, we can't actually have good detection and conviction rates? Well, let's just deny bail more. so that we could try and keep criminals off the street that way. How is that helping? And this is what I say all the time. We're at an unnatural balance point. And because we're at an unnatural balance point, the system is suffering. Fixing it is not going to be easy. But this is what we get. Instead of getting, okay, how do we get trial times down? How do we fix that problem? How do we get conviction rates up? How do we make sure that police prosecutors and witnesses always make it to trial so that we don't have the magistrate now basically lambasting the prosecution and the TTPS for not doing their jobs? How do we do these things? No. We got a bail bill. Because we can't actually solve the problem, we're going to put up a Band-Aid over it to try to, and have people potentially, because you're innocent until proven guilty, have them suffering unnecessarily.
I don't necessarily think that this bail bill was putting a Band-Aid over it. I think it was the intention to help resolve the issue of the conviction rate. It was one aspect of trying to speed up cases. And when I say speed up cases, I meant that is yet to be resolved. I'm not entirely sure what is being done about resolving that issue. But because it takes so much time, I think the government was stating, okay, if we can keep these individuals in remand for another 3 months, 3 to 4 months, hopefully the case will be heard.
They already have people in remand for 15 years.
That is, and this is what I'm saying, that is not going to work. What I'm stating is what I believe to be the intention or the thinking behind the debate for the extension of the bail amendment bill. The arguments in relation to the situation down here in the judiciary, it is a difficult one from the aspect that you want the Ministry of National Security and the Office of the Attorney General, which, by the way, the Minister of Justice now falls under, you want them to work to try and resolve those issues. But it seems as though, whilst we are aware of the situation, whilst we've had the conversations, and even the Minister of National Security stating, I acknowledge the fact that cases are taking too long. I acknowledge the fact that the judiciary and judicial system is moving at a snail's pace. The issue is it now designed that way because we've kept it that way? Is it meant to be this way because, I mean, what's the point?
For all intents and purposes, yes. That's what I mean by an unnatural balance point. Because now you have workers who are accustomed to this way, politicians who are accustomed to it this way. There's too many people that are benefiting in some form or the other. It might be minor benefits. It might just be laziness. Who knows, right? We haven't necessarily had anybody peel back all the layers of what's going wrong and why there's inertia to fix anything with regards to the criminal justice system. But that's where we're at. It's not necessarily meant to be this way, but it's been that way so long that, yes, to some extent you're right. It more or less seems that way now. The intention of the system, because the people who were originally there that set it are obviously long gone. So the intention that was with them is lost. So now this inertia is just institutionalized and we're stuck in this space.
Sean, if the system was up to par, working efficiently, conviction rates were up, cases were being heard on time, then the cases involving Marlene McDonald, the cases involving the former Attorney General and a former UNC Senator Jara Ramdeen and Anna Ramlogan, those would have been pushed through.
Not just that.
But you do understand where I'm coming from.
And I think corruption benefits, because when you have unhealthy systems that are not managed properly, then transparency is harder. And when transparency is harder, corruption is easier. It's that simple. So one of the reasons why they don't want to fix it is for all of the people who are accustomed to using back doors with regards to dealing with favors, getting their business pushed through, getting their cases being quashed, protecting themselves. All of these things are maintained.
The judiciary and the legal fraternity is a very lucrative business. It is a business. And because of that, one can simply make the argument that at the end of the day, though we've heard all these things about, I acknowledge it, and gangs are high on this and that, when we have nothing that's actually been done about it, but we have blanket bills that are being passed that seem to have no effect whatsoever, you have to wonder, if this is being done on purpose. And I can't blame anybody for thinking that way.
Wow.
Because who benefits? Who benefits?
Who benefit? One quick thing though, the previous segment, just before the break, you asked Boris Johnson, charisma, you know? Fitzgerald Hines.
Well,
That's all there is. That's all there is. You want to know why? Maybe that's it. And therein, that's what charisma could do. Charisma could get us empty suits.
I wouldn't even say that Fitzgerald Hines is.
He could talk.
But is just
talk.
talking charismatic? Is that what is talking just charisma?
I mean, it's a special brand of empty talk, but he could talk. Even Mr. Faris Awari doesn't have
Sean,
his talk isn't that special.
Hear me out here. I admire the fact that Fitzgerald Hines could stand up and talk for 40 minutes for one part of a question.
On one point.
Right?
On one point.
I admire that. I also admire the fact that I mean, I believe him to be an intelligent person. And from what I understand, he's a very nice individual as well, nice person. So you cannot attack a character based off of that. I'm basically criticizing him justifiably in terms of his role as Minister of National Security. That being said, a man talking, in my opinion, to the extent that he does, and what he says and what he does, that's not charisma. That's just an individual having no idea what it is I've done or what it is I've achieved, no idea what it is I'm doing, what my role or responsibility is. So guess what? I'm going to talk your ears out for the next 14 minutes. I'm going to sound very good in what I'm saying. I'm stating the obvious, but my use of words and terminology is going to fancy it up a bit. So guess what? At the end of the day, I'll see you in Senate or Parliament tomorrow. That's not charisma. That's just being foolish. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we take a break now on the program, and when we return, well, we get into the bail amendment extension duration. It's a long, long word for a bill. Sorry, a long name. Well, I'll give it to you when we return.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we see you next time.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
I'm here with Andrew Lewis, sailor. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
The most beautiful thing about sailing, in my opinion, is it's where it was, originated from. It was a form of transport that was allowing people to connect different parts of the planet. And sailing today has become many different ways of life, but I have chosen the pathway of the Olympic Games.
For women to feel confident, we have to feel sexy. That doesn't mean outward appearance. It could be a mental state, it could be a physical state, it could be an emotional state. And if you choose to be liberal, and if you choose to be conservative, that is up to you. I just give you the space to choose whatever you want to do.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out, not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. Okay, so the Bail Amendment Extension of Duration Bill 2022 was defeated yesterday. The government failing to get a special majority that was needed to extend it by a year. It was due to come to an end if it was passed on the 5th of August 2023. Instead, it ends on the 5th of August 2022. It sought to actually deny bail for individuals with various offenses from firearm possessions to sexual assault, where largely repeat offenders who served jail terms for 10 years plus are concerned. It would have been deferred for 120 days if no evidence was offered. Now, to speak to us on this case, somebody who presented an impassioned address in the Senate yesterday on this issue is attorney at law and opposition senator. She's with us via the phone, Jayanti Lakshmi-Dayal. Good morning, Senator, and welcome to Talking Point. We're doing well. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, this bill was described as draconian by the opposition leader, and you've even indicated that, and I'm quoting from you now, if this was passed, it will be challenged, and God so help me, I'll be part of the challenge, and it will be struck down, end quote. Explain to me exactly why it was being described as draconian, and why the UNC sought to struck down this bill.
All right, well, in 2019, we gave our support, not me personally, but the UNC, the opposition, gave its support for this bill. And the point that I was trying to make yesterday is that between 2019 and now, you've had significant developments in the law with respect to the issue of bail. That really, in summary, rests in the matter of Achille Charles. And that's why I made the point that the law of the land as it stands today in this country, based on the Court of Appeal judgment emanating from the Chief Justice, Mr. Ivor Archie, in the Achille Charles matter, is that it is a violation of the separation of powers doctrine, which is enshrined in our Constitution, for the Parliament to interfere with the judicial discretion to grant bail. A person under our Constitution has a right to apply for bail. You don't have a right to bail. You have a right to apply for it. So you have access to the courts. The courts then has to implement the law, which is the Bail Act, which says these are the conditions which you must consider when you are deciding whether or not to give bail and so on. What this piece of legislation sought to do, and many incarnations of this legislation in the past, was to remove that discretion from the judge. So once a charge was proffered against someone for a particular type of offense, and they came before the court couldn't consider the unique facts of that case. So if you are, for example, charged with wounding with intent, it didn't matter if you were a father who found a 60-year-old man inappropriately touching your 17-year-old daughter and you plan at him, or if you were a drug dealer who beat up someone who owed you money, or who was competing with your drug block. Both of you would be denied bail. Whereas one may have acted out of, in the heat of the moment, frustration in defense of a child, or whatever it is. I'm not saying that it's right for somebody to react that way, but you understand the difference in the circumstances.
But Senator, let me ask you, based off of the examples that you're using, bail would have been denied for 120 days if no evidence is offered. So if evidence is offered, then that can't be the case. So I'm
if
still...
evidence, actually no, under the bill, what they said is 120 days initially, and once the case starts, then you can extend that period of detention for up to 1 year. If they don't start your case, then you are entitled to apply for bail after 120 days. That's what the law is, and that's what I'm saying is draconian. So the prosecution now, when you are before the court, it's okay, leave her. Sit quietly, baby. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it's if you are denied bail for the 120 days, and then the prosecution brings one witness to say, well, I was the first responder when the call came into the police station, and I went to the scene and I arrested the accused. That's all it takes. So then you are automatically incarcerated for up to 1 year. The second thing that I think a lot of people miss here, the first section of the provision deals with someone who has a conviction and is then subsequently arrested on another charge for an offense, right? But there's also a provision where you can have a charge pending against you, meaning that you've just been charged, you've been released on bail, and then they charge you again for a similar offense or one of the scheduled offenses, and you will be automatically denied bail. So a person who has never actually been convicted, so against whom the police have never completed their matter in court against you, no judge or magistrate has ever made a finding of guilt against you, would be denied bail automatically under this bill without any regard to the circumstances. But the argument here and why the opposition opposes, let me just break it down very simply for you. One was the constitutional issues, as I said. The court said given a variety of circumstances that can arise and the injustice that could occur when somebody is automatically barred from getting bail and so on, that's one aspect of it. But the second aspect of it is that the thing just has not worked. This thing has been touted by the government since 2019 as it is necessary to dismantle gangs, to reduce crime, to bring firearm type offenses under control, etc., etc. Have you read the newspapers over the weekend? Blood just flew in like water through the streets of this country.
And I understand what you're saying.
I took my time to go through the statistics to show the percentage change in some of the most serious offenses we have in this country involving firearms, woundings and shootings. While this law was in effect, it increased. And murders increased, even under the state of emergency. Year-on-year totals from 2020 to 2021, 2 full years when this law was in effect, murders and woundings and shootings were going up, and you had the detection rate by the TTPS going down. So,
we unfortunately, it seems as though we
We'll
lost this answer. We will try
and get it back.
So, what I was trying to interject is because I understand where the senator is coming from in terms of her arguments, in that we have not seen no real effects. And I understand that it constitutionally as well, there is jeopardy involved. So I do understand. My issue now is, whilst you have rejected this bill with good arguments, the issue for me lies with what is it that the UNC would have done if they were in the position? What is it different they would have done? Because I'm not talking about specifically this bill. This bill is one part of the equation. I'm now speaking about we are seeing the issues with crime getting out of control. We are seeing the issues as discussed with the judicial system.
Well, hold on, because you might have to ask her that. You might have to say it again.
Senator, are you with us?
Hi.
Yes.
Sorry, lost you there.
No, that is fine. But the question that I wanted to ask you, because I'm glad you're able to, and I'll repeat myself. I hear where you're coming from. You have made good arguments. But in relation to the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, and in relation to the judicial flaws that we're seeing with conviction rates and cases taking longer than they actually should, years upon years, what is it now? I mean, the UNC has struck down this bill. What would the UNC have offered as an alternative?
Well, the alternative I would tell you is this. If we want to protect people initially when persons are arrested and we believe people are a danger to society, we have to improve this type of evidence we collect against persons. When you apply, let's start from the beginning. Okay, well, actually, let's get before that, right? I always tell people crime has a beginning, a middle, and an end when you're dealing with it. The beginning means you have to do crime prevention. When you talk about crime prevention, look at the mess that our education system is in. Look at the mess our the situation with jobs, the economy, all of that. Those things drive crime. So you have to tackle that on the one hand. I could spend a whole day, maybe a whole week talking about it with you, right? So I'll try to summarize very quickly. When you get to the middle of the problem now, it's when crime actually happens. Firstly, you have to detect the crime. You have to actually arrest the person. Our detection rate for murders is something below 20%, so 1 in 5, if so much. For other types of crime, I think recently they said they have an improved statistics of around 30%. So 3 out of 10 people who are victims of crime may actually see someone arrested. The conviction rate, which is after that person is arrested, actually getting them convicted is even lower than that, of course. So maybe 2 out of 10 of every crime would see someone actually serving a sentence. So you want to raise your detection rate. How do you do that? You and your conviction rate ultimately, you rely on better evidence. CCTV, DNA, forensics, all of those things. You want to manage repeat offenders, the first thing you have to do is when they get out of the system, whilst they're in the system, you have to have some system of rehabilitation. You have to look at the issue of recidivism. Why do people go back out of the prison into a life of crime? Is it because you cannot dismantle the gangs in the prison? Is it because gang life is a way of life in prison? Is it the way that people get protection in the prison because the prison service is so overburdened, it is so overcrowded, they cannot manage the number of prisoners? Is it because the conditions in prison are so horrible that when people exit the prison system, they are mentally, psychologically scarred? They are angry at the world. Listen, you don't sit down. You're not born a criminal. It's circumstances. I mean, of course, the exceptions of people who have mental instability and so on. But the vast majority of people in Trinidad and Tobago, it is just circumstances.
Well,
it is poverty. It's the fact that you're raised without a moral compass. It is the fact that what you experience in life, the hardship. When you come out of prison in this country, people are so jaded and wounded, not to mention they are ostracized by society. They cannot become employed. They cannot become reintegrated into society, so they live on the fringes and they prefer a life of crime because they are accepted by the criminal element.
I have to ask, because it seems as though with regards to this bill, the government is attempting, I have said, in fact, just the previous segment before the break, that this seems like a band-aid and it's not necessarily trying to fix the actual series of problems with our criminal justice system. Now, of course, you mentioned there are things with regards to the economy and education that are beyond the scope of the criminal justice system that matter, but we won't necessarily get into that. I have to ask, based on what we've seen out of the government, will the opposition lobby for any actual fixes or bring to the public any specific areas that we should be demanding to be fixed? Because I think that's one of the issues there. Usually we just talk around the problem. We don't actually have any real concrete ideas being put forward to be implemented. And right now it seems as though some of the things are being done, from what I understand, like DNA testing and stuff, but it's just moving so slowly. Just like how trials in this country, cases, it moves so slowly.
All right. Well,
that it's just backing up.
Let me give you, in short, like I said, there's a whole reform of the entire system that you need, right? But let me give you the short, most, or the quickest or most immediate fixes that I would recommend to the government and that I would do if I were in their shoes. They said yesterday in response to my contribution that we are having DNA testing. Well, okay, I would like to know the numbers because earlier this year I asked a question in the Parliament about basic forensics and there were 16,000 samples waiting to be tested in the Forensic Science Center. All right? So that represents about 16,000 cases that are just there in the court languishing that cannot proceed. Now, apart from that, and the forensics, apart from that, immediately addressing the issue of forensics, I would address CCTV and the use of CCTV footage in court, because that, again, is better evidence upon which you could convict. And then the most immediate fix that I think would assist in getting trials happening quicker and having people actually convicted. You see, I have no problem with you want to impose the most harsh sanction on someone who's convicted, you know. If somebody is convicted and they have their day in court and they have the opportunity to mount a defense and they are found guilty, I say, you know, put them away, lock away the key, lock them away and throw away the key. I don't have a problem with that, right? Keep them away from society. My problem is people who are presumed innocent being locked away, all right? But if the person gets their day in court and they have their trial, and in order to do that, you have to increase the resources to the prosecution and to the courts. So they have talked extensively about opening new courts and so on. They need to speed that up. They need to get the courts there, but you also have to have the human beings to come to the court and deal with it. Just before the 2020 general election, they cut the ribbon opening and hand over the keys to a new building for the DPP's office in Port of Spain in order to expand the DPP's office and hire more staff. The DPP's office has not moved into that building as yet. It's for 2 years. Every year in the budget, they make an allocation for, I don't know if they're paying rent, but I know they've been making allocations for furniture and fittings and so on for 2 new offices to the DPP, one in San Fernando and one in Port of Spain. You need physical space in order to put the people. If you cannot do that for 2 years and we're talking about it and the money is being allocated, well, what is happening with it? Because unless you have a prosecutor, a court needs 2 things to function, you know. Just 2 really basic things. You need the judge and you need the prosecutor. Because with all those 2 things, the court cannot move forward. A person could defend themselves, but nobody could stand in the shoes of the prosecutor. So unless they address those immediate fixes, nothing is going to change. And nothing is going to progress. I've been hearing about the new Forensic Sciences Center since I don't know when. It is sponsored by some Chinese financing and so on. I don't think a blade of grass has yet been cut on the land that they have identified, that they say they're going to build this brand new Forensic Sciences Center. When I asked the question earlier this year in the Parliament, there was a particular area of the Forensic Science Center where the roof fell down and caved in, and so they were unable to process thousands of samples. I can't recall if it was the ballistic section or if it was the part of test, like fluids and samples taken from persons on crime scenes. But one of them, the roof caved in, and they were not able to use that part of the laboratory. When I asked if they made any effort to outsource that function so that they would not hinder the progress of criminal matters, they said no, nothing was done. So you cannot come now, and the government stands there in defense of themselves, saying, we are doing this, we are doing that, we are doing the next. Well, if you're doing all those things and we're not seeing the results, something is wrong. So it's either you're lying and it's not happening, or you're exaggerating what you are doing, or there's a bottleneck somewhere else, and
Well,
it's their
Senator,
job. They are in charge and they have to figure it out.
Well, Senator, it's a pleasure having you on the program once more. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a while.
And it has been a while, and we hope to have you on the program much more often again for your commentary.
Well, now that Parliament isn't sitting, yes, I hope to be available a little bit more.
Wonderful.
But
well, thanks again for having me. Have a good day.
thank you very much too. Keep well and all the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, well, you heard from the Senator there. That's basically more or less why the opposition struck down the bill. And I hear the arguments. The question is whether or not such measures would have been implemented if the colors of the tide had changed. The issues with ballistics, the issues with DNA is nothing new, you know. But at the end of it all, am I in a position to really put that forward, given the fact that it's now been 12 years?
The ASP said, well, they have the testing, but they're building up the database. And again, that's why I said what I said. It seems as though things are just moving too slowly. And I don't know if it's a question of resources. The senator pointed out the DPP's office not having enough resources. The DPP constantly complains about that. Technically speaking, the previous commissioner, the last substantive one, he was also complaining about resources.
Anyway, we have to break for news, but I'm going to pose a question to you nevertheless, and that is, we spoke about charismatic leadership earlier. So I'm asking you, in your opinion, what is charismatic leadership? What makes a charismatic leader? And could you give me an example of a charismatic leader? It could be anybody, but I'm speaking more so within the halls of Parliament. We'll take a break for news now, and when we return, well, we'll open up the phone lines this morning.
7 is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Artist sale at Softbox Gallery. For 2 days only, a sale on paintings by artist Real Leasing. The public is invited to purchase original oils, acrylic, charcoal, and watercolor paintings created between 2011 and 2021. Friday 8th July, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday 9th July, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Softbox Gallery, number 9 Alcazar Street, St. Clair. For more information, email realleasingartist@gmail.com or follow her on social media at Real Leasing Fine Art.
My co-host and colleagues said it best. Questions come first, and then the numbers on the screen. So the question that we're asking you is, could you give us an example of a charismatic leader in Trinidad and Tobago? But more so, what defines, in your opinion, a charismatic leader? That is an important part, because, I mean, we were having a debate, and we were trying to figure it out, and I think you came up with the best response in whom you believe to be probably the most charismatic leader within the halls of Parliament right now.
Yeah, it might actually be. And this is ironic because on this show, it's the first and probably the one public figure who I said, no, let's not do it as firing and cancelling everybody. But with Faris Awari, I was like, as the AG, he is unsuitable for the job and he has to go. However, I have to admit, at the end of the day, he might just be the most charismatic political figure in Parliament right now. Because he does, when the content of what he says, once that's lined up, his delivery is probably second to none.
No, his delivery is certainly always on par. And I think that you can never fault the former Attorney General, and let me get that correct, the former Attorney General, the now Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, for his charm and charisma. Well, charm falls under the purview of charisma, as well as communication style and his ability in terms of his presentation. There is a flow to it, very much always on point, very much confident in his ability, and it's very hard to argue against that characteristic of his.
So, if you haven't realized, folks, the phone lines are open. As my co-host said, that's the question. Now the phone lines are open. And we do have a caller from Digger Martin. Good morning, caller.
Oh, hi, guys. Sean and Keaton, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, listen, I'm not sure of all that you all said, but I'm calling this resign or breathe or just Boris won Brexit. But it was really the lies, the denial, and the cover-up. It's not always the crime, remember, but the cover-up, because he survived the Partygate and the confidence motion, but it was the denial of the fact that he knew of the complaints of groping of the two men by Chris Pincher. Poor guy, I don't know why his parents didn't change his name, but anyway. So it was last week when Dominic Cummings said that the PM he knew before, because the investigation was all the way in 2019, yet he kept appointing him to different things. And Prime Minister himself had said, well, you know, once a pincher, always a pincher. Can you imagine? That's when, no, for real. So that's when they knew that he knew, and he still appointed him as a minister. Well, Rishi say, well, no. So, you know, Sunak said the public rightly expect their government to be conducted properly, competently, seriously, and even though he recognized it could be his last ministerial job, not like our ministers, but he believed the standards are worth fighting for, and that is why he was resigning. Sajid now said he could no longer in good conscience continue to serve. Again, the British people rightly expect integrity from their government. So in the first world, lies have consequences. Meanwhile, back here in the third world paradise, our ministers do not foster confidence at all, because Keith Christopher Rowley said, in this country, people are so accustomed to being lied to, so that when you tell them the truth, as I've been telling you all along, you have trouble believing it. Like he told us the truth about all the scandals, and when he went away, he was MIA for a month. Whether he had a procedure or surgery, we do not know. I'm going now, Keaton. He didn't have the decency to offer support to the nation on the impending cyclone, but he knew how to talk about Kunta Kinte.
Can I just ask you a question before you go, caller from Digger Martin?
Narcissistic one, people are living in the dump, okay? That's a very, very difficult situation. And
let me just ask you a question. So you've said a lot, and it ties into our question actually this morning, and that is, in your opinion...
Yeah, well, the charismatic one is the lady up the road who took time out from the conference, again, we have to call Mia's name, to offer condolences to a family who lost their home in a fire, okay? When, our Prime Minister and everybody else are always missing in MIA. So... she is my example of a charismatic leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Cora.
And Jacinta Ardern. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Right.
You know what's forgive us for actually laughing there for a bit. I couldn't help myself this morning. You see, the caller.
It's her delivery.
Yeah.
Every time she finds a way to get those puns in there.
But
and I'm actually ashamed to say I completely missed the obvious.
I did as well. Listen, the phone line's open. Call in with your thoughts and opinions this morning. If you don't feel like giving us your thoughts on charismatic leadership, we're not obligating you to that. So you're very much open to share your thoughts and opinions on the issues. But
I think Mia Motley is the ideal example in the sense of not only does she have the delivery, but she does not have the missteps, the mental mistakes that some other charismatic leaders
Mental
locally,
mistakes, you say?
Whatever. Well, mental mistakes in the sense of it's not everything that they say is bad. It's just that when they even contradict themselves, you do have to wonder what they were thinking when they said some of the things they said.
We have a caller on the line with us from Claxton Bay. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning.
Morning, Sean. Morning, Keaton.
Morning, Mr. Fisherman.
Yeah, well, why is really going to risk security force in Trinidad, boy? You call the Coast Guard. You call the Coast Guard, they have a boat to respond.
I heard there was another incident on Sunday night.
Well, yeah, that was going to I know the two guys, two brothers. Well, praise God, they let them use a life jacket to go overboard. The pirates gave them a chance to use a life jacket to go overboard. According to the guys say. But you get rescued, they come across the Labrador and they get rescued by people. They go into the station, they call the Coast Guard, no response. Over an hour.
Wow,
they find the boat, after 2 days, they find the boat in Marabella, outside Marabella there. They bust the boat, no engine. You know?
So the Coast Guard, you have to forgive them. The Coast Guard is a government office, so they work from 8 to 4, or in some instances from 9 to 4, and they take a 2-hour lunch break. So, you know, Mr. Fisherman, I hear you, and I'm really sorry that you...
I feel that they have no fuel. They have no fuel for them boat to run.
Again?
Yeah, you know, again, we have to highlight what already going in this country.
It makes me wonder. We always view ourselves...
Thank
you, Mr. Fisherman. It makes me wonder. We always view ourselves as one of the richer countries in the Western Hemisphere. At one point, I think we were number 3. Number 3 in a hemisphere that included Venezuela with its resources, Canada, and the United States. And yet, I don't know if we're there. I think the reality of our economy is we're maybe a lot poorer than we think we are. At least the government is.
I think the government is very much well aware of that.
Well, sorry. Poorer than we think or we perceive them to be.
We have
and they are doing a good job of keeping us perceiving it that way.
We have a call on the line with us from Diego Martin. We've lost that call on the line with us from Diego Martin. Sorry.
Call back, sorry.
We kept you waiting too long. We apologize for that, but the phone line is open to call us back. I want to go back to what the lady from Diego Martin was stating, and really with respect to Boris Johnson and this issue with Chris Pincher. Chris Pincher, he was accused of groping 2 men in a bar, and he tried to nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
But it unfortunately didn't work in his favor.
Okay.
We have a call on the line
with
with us.
but we'll do it after we take the call.
Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, well, my phone signal trips in me, so sorry about that.
That's fine.
Yeah, I want to talk about the senator, I think it's from the UNC there, who spoke just now.
Chancellor Figueroa. Yeah.
I think I listened to the Parliament channel yesterday, and I think she turned the whole tide after her presentation. I give her full marks for that presentation, and I missed the head of the Independence and them. I forgot the guy's name.
Sorry? Oh, Senator Richards.
Senator Richards, right. He and all, the way he was speaking like he was going to vote yes, but after her presentation, I believe he changed his mind, because she really put some good pertinent facts, and I applaud her for it. As President, charismatic. Charismatic is all well and good. There are a few of them that was in Trinidad as well as prime ministers that you could, say so. But being charismatic doesn't mean you're a good leader, no. It only means you're a good talker.
Yeah.
And you can present yourself properly.
To a certain degree,
so the fact remains that, all that is well and good. But I wouldn't put too much things into that being charismatic as anybody. So, there are many good leaders that lead well, and they go about things in certain ways that we don't always understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So I leave you with that, and I thank you for taking my call.
Thank you very much, sir. That's a very interesting point, because there are some people who, whether they're good leaders or not, they're public figures, and you do wonder, are they really charismatic per se?
No,
or how charismatic are they?
They could be charismatic and having charismatic characteristics or qualities, does not necessarily render you as a leader.
Yeah.
And I think that is the point that the caller from Diego Martin was making, because he stated that at the end of the day, you can talk as much as you want. That does not necessarily mean that.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, to what extent now do we shortchange certain leaders or maybe misconstrue them? The flip side is, here's another person who I now thought of at the end of the day, somewhat regular of the program, Dr. Faith B. Israel. I would say that she has both charisma, maybe not necessarily to the extent of a Mia Mottley, with regards to Mia Mottley's full range of experiences. But she has charisma, and as well, she has the capacity to not be just empty words.
I just want to quickly change. I'm looking at some of the comments on social media. One comment is in relation.
Oh boy.
Well, I made the comment in relation to the Coast Guard being a government institution and working from 8 to 4, taking a 2-hour lunch break. And the individual says, "You're wrong. The Coast Guard is an arm of national security and works 24 hours like the TTPS." To that individual, I'm very much well aware of that. Thank you, though, still for pointing it out. I was being facetious in my comments.
Sarcastic.
Yes, and still a bit facetious, because in relation to what the caller from Claxton Bay was stating, he's called in many times on the program to highlight the issue that they have called the Coast Guard. And this could be in the middle of the night, early in the morning. They can't get through to them at all. So that was where my comments stem. So I'm very much well aware that they're an arm of national security, but it's only in relation to me just, putting I guess trying to make a joke out of it, even though we shouldn't be making jokes on these situations.
Or there is the fact that he said that apparently, this is what he has reported to us, that either boats were not available or fuel was not readily available for the boats to move. Now, I don't necessarily think that the Coast Guard would have told him that, but the rumor mill in the country sometimes could be quite accurate. And I'll just leave it at that, because, it seems as though when the ferry was given problems, the minister at the time, who is still the current Minister of Works and Transport, was not aware of what's going on, but the rumor mill more or less had the situation down pat. But here's an interesting thing with regards to the Pincher scenario. And this is the lesson that we could draw specifically from that. Because we don't necessarily have allegations of sexual misconduct or assault in our political class, at least not yet. But
there have been allegations put forward before.
Well, not currently.
Okay.
Hence, not yet in this current administration, in this current parliament. However, I think the main lesson is when Boris Johnson said that he regrets not acting on the claims in the past. And I do wonder to what controversies we have currently will our political leadership regret not acting and allowing or tolerating, this is not a big deal, we could nip it in the bud, we could try and cover it up, we could try and smooth things over, spin it, whatever. Will it grow? My only thing is, though, with our new cycle, things tend to grow only so much and then it stops and then we kind of move on to the next thing.
Well, that's kind of how we have to show. Just in agree. We have a caller on the line with us from the Northern Range. Good morning, caller.
Morning to you two gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, the gangs and the gang leaders had a field day yesterday, drinking champagne and sending out, firing off the AR-15s, and they're asking that the Fazal Razak bring some more AR-15 for them. Just because of that bill that was thrown down. So this is how the thing going. The educated dunce and them looking at it in a political way, and the other two dealing with it in a forensic frolic and happiness. So we have a lot of things to see coming down the road between now and general election.
Interesting.
Last night we got word that some of the leaders was thanking somebody named Babuji who sold them 3 AR-15 some in his container. I don't know. We're digging up to see those container importers, and we just want to catch one. And before we go home by them, we will contact the police couple hours, so when they reach here, we're not there anymore. So this is how the thing will be rolling on. So you all have a good day and be safe.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I think his last point there, we just want to get one. We have all this intelligence, right? We have all this intelligence, all these cases being investigated, we have all this intelligence. Not one gun smuggler has been brought in. Not one. Not even the foot soldier of the gun smuggler, much less the actual boss who's profiting from the guns being brought in. And then there's also the drug smugglers.
He used a term there, educated dunce. And, you know, it's interesting how much that actually works, especially when we can label certain individuals or at least comments that they make or actions on their part. Educated dunce. At the end of the day, I've made this argument before. You can have all the knowledge of the textbooks that have been printed, but at the end of it, it still does not render you as intelligent. Understand where I'm coming from. Call on the line with us from Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, caller.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Tobago.
How are you this morning?
We're doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty all right. The previous caller doesn't realize that the hierarchy of the police said that we have row cops in the police service.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful who you report your findings to.
Well, that caller is a very, very fair point. Yep, you're right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller.
No, caller is absolutely right.
I think one of the interesting things, I don't know from commissioners before him, but the former commissioner, Griffith, he did make a big point of emphasis, you could even argue, with regards to errors of the TTPS, right? With regards to customer service, with regards to road cops. Now, to what extent he actually was effective dealing with those things, you know, depending, you get varying opinions. But I don't know to what extent it was dealt with that manner before. And I'm hoping that if, again, it seems as though we have too many issues though in the country, because I just spoke about, you know, things grow for a while and then they kind of end there and we move on to the next thing. And in the show, we've moved on to the next point, because this is another thing now with regards to dealing with the rogue police officers in order to clean up the TTPS so that they could be more effective at fighting crime. It's just so many things now. How can we focus on all of it? You can't. You have to focus on one. And I do wonder to what extent now the mountain is so big and it's growing even bigger that it seems insurmountable. And maybe that's why, to tie things back to when we started, the inertia of the system to get things fixed. That's one of the reasons probably why.
So a couple of things. With respect to the former commissioner of police, I remember he stating that, and as you pointed out, to what extent did he deal with rogue officers within the police service? Because at the end of it all, intelligence is one thing, and you know, how you act upon it. And if you're stating that they were involved in criminal activity or facilitating criminal activity, why not have them prosecuted? You know, shifting them to another division is not going to stop it from there. Shifting them to another division is just taking the crime from one division to another.
I think part of the problem is if your police service was healthy, then this would be more of an anomaly. And you could take your time, you know, innocent until proven guilty, go through all these steps, whatever. When it's potentially too widespread, well, now this is just an indicator. Hey, you could break the rules, you know, and you'll get a slap on your wrist.
What? No.
And it's not. It's going to take a long time before anything actually gets done.
He made it a point in instances. For example, do you remember when these youth were swimming in the beaches during COVID-19 lockdown? He went the next day. He gathered a police bus, put them all in the police bus, took a video and whatnot. So he did all those things. But the question is, if you're making those points and then you're stating that I was aware of the rogue police officers, we just transfer them, why is it that you did not arrest them? You know?
Evidence.
So then what intelligence were you acting on then?
And I guess that's probably the million-dollar question that we're never going to get an answer to, because even if the problem is fixed, They're not going to retroactively explain the situation to us. What do we have in both crime from the general public, gangs, etc., as well as rogue officers? Well, a difficulty to collect enough evidence to prosecute, to charge, to convict these individuals in a timely manner.
But then you can argue the case about transferring me for a division based off of that. Because then what other reason are you giving me for transferring me to another division? Is it because you are the commander so that you have the power to do that? Is that what the case is? You see, I guess it's very hard to make that comment because you knew about your criminal behaviors.
Your criminal activity is probably tied to a geographic or demographic situation.
But it doesn't
transferring
matter.
You
prosecuting would have been.
I get it. Trinidad is so small; it's not really making a big difference.
Exactly.
At the very least, removing you from your former colleagues might be trying to split up whatever criminal racket potentially is going on. If other members are involved, maybe not. But yes, I get what you're saying. It comes down to the fact that it's a very lukewarm or halfway response because we can't actually see things through properly.
Very finally, as we start to wrap up for this morning's episode of Talking Point, just to inform the public, if they were not aware, that according to leader of government business in the Senate, the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown, he has informed that the occupational safety and health report into the tragedy that transpired in Parry in which 4 fishermen lost their lives, that report will remain confidential. It is completed. The report has been completed, but will not be made public until the Commission of Inquiry commences in August. He stated that it is expected that OSH, it is expected, it is not guaranteed, it is expected that OSH will appear before the Commission of Inquiry.
I would just like to find out. I could even understand if he said until it is disclosed to the Commission. But he said when the Commission starts. What exactly does that mean and why? So they start. That doesn't mean that they're gonna have our representative from OSH to appear, right? Nope. So then why are we waiting the month? And the whole, granted, yeah, it's not, it's a big deal, it's not that big of a deal all at the same time. I just don't understand why.
The argument put forward is because so it will not create any level of bias before the proceedings are heard.
Hence why I say you reserve it until either after the proceedings or until after OSH appears before the Commission. But that's not what he said. So maybe his communication is not effective.
Withholding the report from the public in itself already creates great bias in the sense that it is being withheld as part of a cover-up.
Yes,
so
that is true, unfortunately.
I am most grateful of you informing us that the report has been completed. However, to state that it will not be publicized, it will only go before the Commission of Inquiry, expected, not guaranteed.
I am impressed at the ability of the miscalculation politically of our politicians. I am impressed at that, right? So as charismatic as the politicians could be, to me, the obvious things, implications of making a statement, you just said it there. It smells like a cover-up.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget the news, the 10 a.m. news here on WSN News on the Hour, and Strictly Legal with Rondell Donovan begins right after that. You can look out for the conversation this morning. It's in relation to the Caribbean Court of Justice and whether or not it should be the final appellate court in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Keaton Shaw. That has been Mr. Shaw Michael Small. Thank you very much this morning. Today is a good day to have a good day. As with any day, it's the day before the start of the weekend. And all things concerned, fingers crossed, we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.